While everyone else is focused on culture wars, DEI fights, and target controversies, something much bigger is happening under the surface. A massive shift is being engineered, one that could change how cities work, how justice is served, and who really holds the power. It's called Freedom Cities.
Doing was unthinkable, how good it was, how great it was for our country. Our objective will be a quantum leap in the American standard of living. That's what will happen. Here are just a few of the ways we can do it. Almost 1/3 of the landmass of the United States is owned by the federal government, with just a very, very small portion of that land, just a fraction, 1/2 of 1%. Would you believe that? We should hold a contest to charter up to 10 new cities and award them to the best proposals for development. In other words, we'll actually build new cities in our country again. These freedom cities will reopen the frontier, reignite American imagination, and give hundreds of thousands of young people and other people, all hardworking families, a new shot at home ownership and, in fact, the American dream.
And if you think this is just another business project, think again. This could be one of the biggest power grabs in modern history. For centuries, race was the primary framework used to divide and control people. White versus black was the old technology of advantage, the system that dictated who had access to wealth, power, and opportunity. But if you're still only focused on that, you're missing the new technology of advantage happening right in front of your eyes. The new technology of control isn't about color. It's about who controls the land, who writes the laws, and who owns the system itself. It's about legal structures, economic zones, and private governance models that allow a handful of people to create their own rules, their own courts, and their own version of justice in the midst of a powerless mass of people. And if you think this is just another business project, think again. This could be one of the biggest power grabs in modern history. Imagine a city that's privately run, a city with its own laws, its own court system, and almost no government oversight. That's what freedom cities are supposed to be. Charter cities built on federal land with special legal and economic privileges. Donald Trump and his allies are pushing for these cities as a way to revitalize America, bringing innovation, affordability, jobs, and economic freedom. But in reality, they could create an elite ruling class with total control over land, over the law, and over people. And here's the kicker. They aren't just talking about it. It's already happening. In Honduras, a private city called Próspera was created under a similar model. It was supposed to bring economic prosperity to the people there, but instead it's causing massive issues.
This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman with Juan Gonzalez as we turn to Honduras, where communities are fighting back against privatization and foreign exploitation. The Honduran president, Xiomara Castro, and the UN Congress repealed a law enacted by the previous right-wing administration that established what are known as Economic Development and Employment Zones, or ZEDEs. The law also allowed the private cities and special economic zones to have functional and administrative autonomy from the national government, which opponents say is a threat to Honduran sovereignty and the livelihood of local communities. Now, a Delaware-based corporation called Próspera has launched a case to challenge the repeal of the law under the Dominican Republic's Central America Free Trade Agreement. The company established one of the zones on the island of Roatan and is now seeking almost $11 billion, which amounts to nearly two-thirds of Honduras's entire 2022 budget. Can you explain what's taking place? For people to understand around the world, you've got U.S. corporations running cities.
After the coup in 2009, there was this radical project to create these ZEDEs, as you mentioned, private cities that U.S. corporations could come in and control the territory. The territory was removed from municipal jurisdictions, and then they had the power as a corporation to set their own regulatory standards, tax policy, monetary policy, security forces, have their own separate court system, and basically run their own government. And in democratic process, fortunately, they managed to overturn this corrupt law. The National Assembly overturned or repealed the law, and that really should be the end of the story. It's a victory for democracy in Honduras after a very dark period of right-wing rule. And then that's not the end of the story because of the trade agreement that no one knew about, and these secretive trade rules that empower corporations to be able to challenge democratic policies outside of the court system. This isn't in a U.S. court. It's not in a Honduran court. It's in a private tribunal of private sector lawyers, 3 arbitrators, who will decide whether to basically ransack the treasury of the tiny country of Honduras to the tune of $11 billion with a B, which again, as you mentioned, would bankrupt the country.
So what happens when the same thing is built in the United States? Do you really think corporate-controlled cities will be looking out for the people or their bottom line? Próspera isn't just some random project. It's backed by billionaire venture capitalists like Peter Thiel, Mark Andreessen, Promenos Capital, Niue Capital, the same people pushing for extreme libertarian-type experiments where the wealthy make the rules. These billionaires aren't just funding a city. They are funding a new form of government, one where corporations rule and democracy, the voice of the people, fade away. By now, you understand how freedom cities could shift power away from the people and into the hands of private investors. But here's the real kicker. Once these cities are built, there may be no way to take that power back. In Honduras, when the government tried to repeal the law that allowed private cities, Próspera hit them with an international lawsuit that could bankrupt the entire country. Why? Because hidden inside a trade agreement was a clause that protected the private city from government interference. Now look at what's happening in the United States. Trump keeps imposing and pausing tariffs. But what if this isn't about tariffs at all? And what if the pausing and imposing is part of a greater scheme? What if behind the scenes, his administration is negotiating private trade agreements that protect freedom cities from ever being shut down? If these trade agreements get locked in, freedom cities won't just be U.S. projects on U.S. land. They will be internationally protected investment zones on U.S. lands. Future presidents won't be able to remove them without triggering massive lawsuits, just like in Honduras. That means once freedom cities exist, they could operate outside of government control forever. A parallel America run by private investors, legally untouchable. If we don't start paying attention now, by the time we realize what's happening, the deal will already be done. This is Sean Speaks.